We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Disrupt Your Week. Those of you watching live, those of you watching the replay, excited to be here. My name is Paul Blanchard. I am president of a company called Habit Finder. We just happen to be the official Og Mandino company. Og wrote an amazing book about 60 years ago called The Greatest Salesman in the World, which ironically isn't about sales. It's about a story, a camel boy who wanted to become the greatest salesman in the world, and so tracked down Pathros, who was the greatest salesman in the world at the time, and learned some incredible lessons from him, known as the 10 Scrolls, the secrets of success, the wisdom of the ages, as they were called. An incredible book that has made an impact on over 50 million people. And we had the opportunity to be able to start our company based on carrying Og Mandino's legacy into the future, and now do business as Habit Finder. That's really the objective. That's what Og was talking about in the scrolls right from the get-go, is that we're a slave to our habits, that our habits are going to mark out a path that already threatens to imprison our future. So in a world where we're investing so much time and money and energy into our behaviors and into our emotional preferences, which are important to be aware of, but do not dictate the direction, the fulfillment, and the success of our lives. Yes, action must be taken, but action that cannot be sustained is going to be short-lived tactics and often have collateral damage in the lack of fulfillment or the lack of sustaining power that we have there. It is only in the patterns of the brain that we can mark out a different path for our future, that we can actually experience things differently. Now, this has given us an incredible opportunity as a company to work in Global 100 publicly traded companies, hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs that we've had an impact on, many home-based businesses, small businesses, relationships, and everything in between. Because when you're working with the patterns of the brain, we get some very simple equations. Like, there are things we want to create in our life, that we want to actually enjoy the creation of them and enjoy them being created. And then we've got the patterns in the brain. And the more aligned the patterns in the brain become to the objectives we want to create, then the more likely they are to be created. We want what we do. We want what we feel to be a natural outcome of how we think. Because if it has been instilled as a habit of thinking, a pattern of thought, it becomes more reliable. If it becomes more reliable, it becomes more predictable. If it becomes more predictable, the brain appreciates it tremendously and gives us an opportunity to find more fulfillment and peace and success. And in particular, today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is leadership. Leadership is applicable to everyone, because it's not just being the executive or C-suite level of a company or an owner of a company that qualifies you as a leader. The first thing that qualifies any leader is personal leadership. Not because you've got that mastered, you've got you figured out, now you're ready to be a leader to others. No, in fact, we're usually the last ones to be our best follower. Okay, we're the last ones to believe in ourselves. We're the last ones to totally trust ourselves. We just want to believe that it's about everybody else, that we don't trust other people, that we're not qualified to lead, when really it's the lag of our own intrinsic challenges. But it's only through focusing on the leadership of others and the willingness to have that make an impact on our personal leadership that makes all the difference. Now, those of you that have been listening to me, those of you that have heard me speak before, and I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and I do this show live on Clubhouse, and I also do this show on Facebook Live. And then once I finish the presentation part, which is usually 20, 25 minutes, at the latest 30 minutes, then I sign off of Facebook and stay on Clubhouse for the opportunity to be able to stay on there and interact and ask questions and engage and coach and all those things. But those of you who've been listening to me know that I have a tendency to be controversial, to be contradictory, to go against the grain. And I don't necessarily do that out of sport, okay? I don't do that out of recreational concepts. I do that because I believe that unlearning is as important, if not more important, than learning. In fact, based on developmental studies, after you're about 6 years old, I would say unlearning is one of the most important things you can do, more important than learning. Okay. And the opportunity to be able to go through, Nancy knows what I'm talking about. Okay. It's not necessarily that I enjoy that. I try to be very careful to make sure I don't tell people like it is for the sake of telling people like it is, because all that is just telling people like it is to me. And anyone who takes pride in that, they're telling it like it is for them. And I am smart enough to know that my reality is not your reality, and that neither of our realities is the reality. And leadership exposes some of these issues more than anything else. It can be one of the greatest, most dangerous roles you ever fulfill in your life. But I believe it's unavoidable for all of us. We're all leaders in some way or another, whether it's to ourselves, to our spouses, as co-leaders, to our kids, to our friends. We all have opportunities where we find ourselves with leadership opportunities. You don't need the title. You don't need the army following you for that to be the case. Okay? But it is very difficult to get better and better as a leader. And so that is where I appreciate the disruption, where I'm not interested in you agreeing with everything that I say today, but I would appreciate the opportunity to present it, to shake things up for you, to loosen the soil, to shake the snow globe, to give you an opportunity to think about your leadership differently, to be able to challenge your personal leadership as well as the leadership of others, whether it's a volunteer army that you're building or a sales force that you've hired or a team of engineers or whatever it might be. I think these are some critical pieces to understand as a leader. They are 5 of the toughest challenges and principles in leadership that are not talked about enough. I've had conversations like this with a lot of people, and I get nodding heads. I don't get a lot of kickback on disagreement with this, but there's a lot of intellectual agreement, but not always the opportunity to have it sink in deeper to make a real intrinsic impact on how we show up as leaders. So if any of you consider yourselves leaders, or you have people in your organization or in your inner circle or your circle of influence that have some kind of leadership role for themselves or others, please share this out, tag them. These are 5 critical things that can be tough to swallow. They can be tough to hear, but I deliver them today, hopefully, with the intention of being able to help you shift and tweak a little bit. See, in our all or nothing minds, when we hear opportunities to improve, the all or nothing mind assumes, okay, if we're really going to buy into that as something that can help us improve, then we must suck at it. Why? Because it's easier to suck at something and get better at it than to be good at something and get better at it. The better you get at something, the harder it is to become better at it, because the brain starts building habits and patterns and starts lowering your state of consciousness around doing it. It becomes automatic, which is a beautiful thing, but equally a very dangerous thing. The ability to continually improve as a leader is a very difficult thing to do. Very uncomfortable, very disruptive, very contradictory, counterintuitive to be able to do well. So I hope to be able to navigate that productively today. We're going to go in reverse order, okay, in these 5 things, because number 1, I think, is number 1 for a reason. You could argue the position of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but for the most part, I consider these to be a pretty good ascending scale in terms of these very challenging principles around leadership, okay? So those of you just joining on Clubhouse, those of you watching here on Facebook Live, welcome to Disrupt Your Week. As always, I'm here every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, broadcasting live on the Habit Finder Facebook page and the Habit Finder YouTube channel, and also live here on Clubhouse. Those of you on Clubhouse, I sign off at about 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time, so in about 21 minutes, once I've had an opportunity to present the topic for the week, and I stay on there and interact and coach and whatever else. So any of you watching on YouTube or Facebook are welcome to jump in and join us for that on Clubhouse, and welcome. Happy to have you here. Today we're talking about the five of the, not the 5 toughest, but 5 of the toughest challenges in leadership that are not talked about enough. Okay, let's dive in. Let's do this. Number 5 is responsibility. What do I mean by that? It is assuming unnecessary responsibility is one of the toughest challenges in leadership. It is so important that if you're going to be a leader, that if you are going to build a volunteer army, which is the best way to build any army, by the way, because then it's an army built on commitment, not on compliance. So even if you're hiring people, you will want to follow the principles of a volunteer army. It'll make your business more innovative, more fluid, more agile, and more fulfilling for you and the people involved. But if you're going to build a volunteer army, it is critical that you accept and embrace that you are not responsible for anyone else's success. Okay? The harsh way to put that is you are not that important for them. You are that important for you, but you are not that important for them. You are not their savior. You are not their hero. Great leaders make them the heroes of their own stories and own the opportunity for you to be a hero of your own story, not theirs. This is a very, very difficult principle to embrace and trust. Because although right now you may believe it, when you get back out there in the front lines with people and you stop and time out, where am I at? Ooh, I'm a little emotionally compromised right now because I feel like I'm letting them down, or I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I feel like they're not doing enough and they don't get it and I'm wanting this more than they do. And we find ourselves in this emotional turmoil of leadership that often is born from believing that I am responsible for their success. You are not. And in fact, here's the counterintuitive piece. Here's the other side of that to consider. And that is the fact that if you will truly trust that you're not responsible for success, you are in the most powerful, influential position to be able to help them succeed. Do you know why attorneys don't represent family members? Why paramedics are not called to the scene if it's their loved ones that are there? Why police officers or detectives are not involved in the cases or crimes if they have close, personal, intimate relationships with those people? Because then they are compromised. They can't do their best work if they are emotionally compromised. It is not that they don't care. Okay? It is not that they are indifferent. Because you've got to have love as your greatest weapon for success, Og said in Scroll 2 of The Greatest Salesman in the World. Love is the greatest secret to success in all ventures. You will want to love people. You want to care about people. That is a must. However, if you believe you are responsible for them, then you will become emotionally compromised. You will feel like you need to prove something. You will feel like you're either doing more for them than they appreciate, or they're not doing enough, or you're not doing enough. And all of those are lose-lose situations. You are so much more free and available to serve when you don't have to. Okay? Biblically, talks about going the extra mile. That is because thousands of years ago, a Roman soldier could command you to carry his gear for a mile, and it was punishable by death if you refused. And so what was taught is go the extra mile, because the extra mile is the one you choose because you're not responsible for it. You didn't have the responsibility to go the second mile. And so it gets to become yours. You become more available to it, more enthusiastic about it, and more energy to be able to pour into it. It is the same thing in leadership. If you can understand that you are not responsible for their success, that's not a cop-out. It's quite the opposite. It actually makes you so much more available, so much less compromised, so much more free to intuitively facilitate the journey that is required for them to become a great leader and for them to be able to grow. So that's number 5. Number 5 of one of the toughest challenges to deal with in leadership is responsibility, unnecessary responsibility. Okay? Number 4. Number 4 is teaching versus challenging. Ooh, this is a difficult one to work with. There is a pandemic out there. Okay, I'm not talking about the C word. I'm talking about in terms of great conversations. Oh yeah, I had a great conversation with it. This used to be a running joke in one of the companies that I worked in, where it was every manager wanted to talk about the great conversation they had with a teammate that was struggling, and now they're doing so much better. And it must have been that great conversation. Oh man, and I had a great conversation with someone, so we must have fixed all their problems. It's all better now because we had a great conversation. No, that is the brain's desire to make things intellectual, to make things easier by just talking about them. No wonder we love teaching, because it's substance, it's got power, it serves people. We love it. We love being able to do that, but it doesn't actually move someone forward. Just because you were taught the answers doesn't mean you have the solutions. Just because you were taught the answers doesn't mean you have the solutions. And as a leader, just because you taught them the answers doesn't mean they have the solutions. Solutions have got to be experienced and experimented. And if we just show up with the data, okay, the clerical data of our own experiments and expect them to be able to produce the same results without having the same experiments, we're robbing them of being challenged. We're not here as leaders to teach people everything. Teaching is important, but a minimal amount. And what is the minimal amount of teaching? What is the minimal amount of information they need to take the next baby step of progression in their life? The next baby step of progression, not the next giant leap, the next baby step of progression in their life. As a leader, you are there to help facilitate just enough teaching to get them into action and then challenge the action. I think one of the greatest leadership principles ever taught unintentionally, maybe unintentionally, was by Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz. Talk about the difference between being taught and being challenged. Okay? Glinda, the White Witch, pointed out at the end of this incredible, random, seemingly irrelevant journey that Dorothy went on, that she had the ability to go home at any time. What? Meaning she just had to teach her, and she could have clicked her heels and gone home right as soon as she landed in the Munchkin village. That wasn't the point. The point wasn't for her to teach her, it was to challenge her. It was to ask her questions that caused Dorothy to ask her own questions, that caused her to hear herself, that caused her to go down this random journey on this windy yellow brick road and meet this idiot that actually turned out to be one of her closest and trusted friends, and then met this person she thought was hard and empty, who had more heart than anyone, even though he didn't even have one, met this gruff, intimidating person that actually turned out just to be a coward that was overcompensating, met this witch who just needed a little bit of basic elements to melt, seeming a hard-hearted, cold-hearted witch. I want to change the first letter of that term, who just melted from the simplest things. We can melt these people. And then all this other random stuff, realizing that as part of facilitating this challenge for the people that we lead, there's going to be times that trees throw apples at them. That's random. There's going to be very aggressive flying monkeys. And we're going to want to fly in and teach them to click their heels and go home. But that wasn't the home that she was really looking for. The home that she wanted, what could only provide the feeling of home, was to reveal her true self, which you can't shortcut that process. Okay, same thing happens in Labyrinth with Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie. She meets the worm, she walks across the place she's been stuck in, and the worm goes, no, not that way. Go the other way. And then you hear the worm say, oh, if she had gone the other way, she would have gone straight to the castle, which is where she was trying to go. But again, we're taught it's not about the shortcut. It's not about the quickest way. And we want to force that by teaching and solving and fixing. Those things will be naturally there, but if we can lean against them and resist them and facilitate and challenge, it will serve us so well, and it'll serve them well. So the fourth greatest challenge, toughest challenge in leadership is being able to discern the difference between teaching and challenging, and teach just enough to create an arena for the challenge, the context for it. But there will be struggle. There will be burnout. There will be disappointment. There will be anger. There will be excitement, enthusiasm. There will be everything. Just like Dorothy's journey to the Emerald City and back. But it is necessary. You cannot shortcut someone else's facilitated journey. As much as we want to teach to help them cut right to the end, okay, we want people to get where they're going as fast as possible, but not quicker than they should. Because as much as the trees throwing apples and the flying monkeys felt random and even oppressive and difficult, they were very necessary for Dorothy to experience who she already was. It just needed to be revealed. That is one of the most difficult things to be patient about as a leader, is to teach just enough, to not overtrain, to not overteach, to not over great conversation, but to facilitate and challenge, even at risk of you being the villain. It could have been really easy for Dorothy to get real pissed off at Glinda. What? I had to do all that when I could have just gone home? But Dorothy didn't go on that whole journey to become a victim. She went on that whole journey to become a victor. She could feel it in her bones. Glinda became her guide, and she became the hero of her own story. That is one of the most difficult, patient things we can do for the people that we're leading. And there's some that are a lot further down the yellow brick road when we meet them than others. So it's not like you need to start everyone down the road, but don't be in such a hurry to shortcut by teaching and great conversations. That doesn't mean you don't teach. That doesn't mean you intentionally withhold. It just means that you start putting more weight into the challenge and the facilitation rather than in the teaching and the great conversation. Because because one of them feels good up front and is frustrating later. The other one is frustrating up front and feels good later. I'll let you figure out which is which. Number three, toughest challenge in terms of leadership principles that just aren't talked about enough. Number three is the need to be right. The need to be right is so difficult as a leader. And it plays right into number four. We teach because we need to be right. And we probably are on some degree, especially if we're very emotionally attached to it. We've done those experiments. We know that way leads to idiots and lions and tigers and bears and a pompous wizard. And you don't need to do that. I've already done that. And we need to be right. We do this with our kids. We do this with our spouses. We do this with the people that we're trying to lead. And we rob them of the opportunity to be able to experience things. And they'll experience them more productively. They'll get through their journey faster if we don't leave them feeling wrong. It's one of the toughest things to do as a leader, because you likely have a vantage point that they don't. You've likely been down your own yellow brick road to some degree, but that was yours, not theirs. And we get very caught up and fixated on it theirs needing to be ours. That's why I caution against the weight you put into expertise. If it's on a technical or systematic level, expertise is awesome. If it's in terms of life, love, connection, growth, expertise can be just as dangerous as it is helpful, because it's someone talking to you from their yellow brick road, not yours. And be careful that we don't listen to theirs trying to shortcut ours, because every bit of that journey was necessary for Dorothy, and the same is true for you. We don't need to manufacture it. We don't need to make it worse. We don't need to make it harder. We don't need to seek out the flying monkeys and the trees throwing apples. They'll naturally come along, but it's how we interpret them, how we experience them. And if we're making people feel wrong because they're doing something that was stupid and why didn't you listen to me and whatever, we're going to miss the opportunity to be able to mitigate some of the risk and facilitate a productive experience. Leadership isn't about just letting people screw up. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying, though, is they're more likely to screw up. They're more likely to rebel. They're more likely to quit if you make them feel wrong. And it's impossible for us to know that we're making people feel wrong because we're so emotionally attached to being right. It's like writing "I love you" on a note and then putting it on the front of a tank and driving it at them and wondering why they're running away. Did they not see the note? No, there's a tank coming at them. And the tank is our emotional connection, our obsession with our ideas and what we believe to be right. The other challenge is you're going to have people you lead who decide to leave. And we want them to come back. One of the greatest lost principles of business and sales and everything else is allowing people to come back. And guess what people don't want to come back to? They don't want to come back to "I told you so." Not because you're going to say "I told you so," but because you needed to be right when they left. They left with that taste in their mouth. And as soon as they start to come back, they're not welcomed like the prodigal son. There's no celebration. There's no wonderful. There's no saying, no worries about all that. That all had to do with how they left. We all hear about how the prodigal son came back, but he also left without resistance. Took his inheritance. No resistance. The father just, I love you, son. And then came back and was received the same way. When we need to be right, we create an I told you so energy. Okay, I work with a lot of people in the health and wellness arena, and they can sometimes get very fixated on the only way to become healthy. And that can be a challenge because you're going to have people who find other ways. And even if you know statistically that that's probably not going to work for them, if you need to be right about that, and they go out and find that out, that it didn't work for them, they're now depleted and weak. The last thing you want to hear when you're depleted and weak or feel is, I told you so. And they're going to come back hearing the echoes of you needing to be right, and they're not going to come back to you. There's incredible growth that can happen in a business when you don't need to be right. You can get to what is right. You can get to what is good. You can get to what is helpful, but only after you bring someone's wall down. Otherwise, you're just throwing up on it. It's going to be frustrating for them and for you. Now you've got throw up that's splashed back on you, and they've got a dirty wall. That's not great for either of you. I'm not saying that if you're right about something, you need to forget about it. I'm just saying as a leader, it's very difficult to put it on the bench for a second and step into somebody's world and find out if there's something you didn't quite know about why they were making the decision that you made an assumption about. And you're never going to get to the bottom of that if you need to be right. So, number 5 is unnecessary responsibility. Number 4 is teaching versus challenging. And number 3 is needing to be right. And especially that I told you so energy. You're going to rob yourself of an opportunity to allow deserters who maybe needed that diversion to invite them to come back. Okay? To invite them to come back. And you don't invite them by saying, come back. No, that's an energy thing. You've already lost them if they left with your energy to need to be right. No matter how nicely you try to welcome them back, there's going to be a repellent to that because they're going to feel the I told you so, whether you say it or not. Number two of the 5 toughest challenges in leadership that are not being talked about enough. Number 2 is the law of attraction. Let me explain. The law of attraction equals subtraction. This is the challenge, is that we want to be optimistic in life. We want to welcome things into our lives, but we don't always remember that for new truth to come in, old truth has to die. For new growth to occur, we don't fit in the same clothes anymore. And sometimes that's really painful. Sometimes that involves friends. Sometimes that even involves family. Sometimes that involves clubs and groups we're a part of, things that we used to believe. That's the side of the law of attraction that we don't always talk about. And it is one of the greatest challenges in leadership. Great leaders live out loud, not to be louder than everyone else, but to make sure that their voice can be heard by those ready to listen. And living out loud, like the law of attraction, is not necessarily attracting people to you. Living out loud and the law of attraction is sorting. It sorts people. It sorts out those that you will want to be around. It sorts out those you will want to serve, those that you will want to facilitate, those that you will want to lead and turn into their own leaders and partner with. It doesn't convert people. It doesn't transform them into someone that they're not. It sorts, and sorting is painful. Because a lot of us that are drawn to leadership for the right reasons wish that everyone could just get along. Everyone could want to grow. Everyone could want to be better. And it's even more painful by the fact that we have an acute level of empathy that we can see their potential. We can see that it's in there if they would just own it. And then we need to be right about their potential. And then we have great conversations and overteach and overtrain about their potential. And then we take unnecessary responsibility about their potential. Just went through number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 of the toughest challenges in leadership that come from realizing that this law of attraction, this optimism, this manifestation does as much to bring into your life as it does to sort and detox your life as well. And that's not necessarily easy. I'm not sharing this with you so you can be like, yeah, you're right, screw them. No, that's not a productive energy either. It is painful for new truth or new people to come in and old truth and even old people to leave. There's a mourning. There's a grieving that occurs. We should allow ourselves plenty of room to process that in a healthy way emotionally, which also brings in optimism to this piece. Optimism has been grossly misunderstood in this world. Believe that optimism is being all positive. It's not. At the core root, the etymology, the definition of the word optimism means to get the optimal result, the best result, with the least amount of bad. Not no bad, the least amount to be able to get the optimal result. And sometimes that's 51% good, 49% bad. Sometimes that's 99% good, 1% bad, and everything in between. But if we believe optimism is 100% good, and we should only talk about good things, and everyone should all walk around pretending that it's all good, and you can only come into this group and into this chat if you're only talking about positive things, that's bullcrap. That's not leadership. It's not life. Life is not all positive. Life is not all good. And optimism is not about excluding the bad, excluding the negative, even if you believe it's drama and it's complaining. 99% of those people are just people who feel alone and don't feel heard. And so their brain is making them desperate. And they're saying things that they don't even realize they're saying, waiting for someone to listen to them. And if you would listen, they would hear themselves. But no, we'd rather just exclude them, or we'd rather just teach them or have great conversations with them and need to be right about them. Feel unnecessarily responsible for them. No, listen to them and they will hear themselves. And they'll more than likely stop sounding like a victim or a drama queen. The brain does crazy things when we're in desperation, when we feel alone, when we don't feel heard, when people are around us, but we're lonelier than ever. And as a leader, you get the opportunity to show up in a very rare way for that person. But believing that it's all about attraction and optimism and positivity, the way that it's been just poured out there just to put sugar on crap. No, positive is the outcome we're looking for, which requires us to be productive, which hopefully will have positivity involved, but not always. Sometimes in life, the productive thing to do is not what feels positive. We need to be productive. We want to understand that as we attract as a leader, it will subtract to keep balance in our lives. And that's painful. That's difficult to work through. And you will not want to do that ignorantly. You will not want to do that blatantly. You will not want to be some warrior of, yeah, these aren't my friends anymore. Screw you. These are my people. No, that's not the fluid progression of life. That's not the messiness, the gray area, the contradiction, the hypocrisy of life. All those things are about humanity. So be ready to go through that curiously and not be so quick to draw to and not be so quick to cut off from, but to find clarity in that always messy, interesting space of growth. So that's number 2. The law of attraction of going forward, of bringing good things into your life also results in subtraction, and that can be painful. All right. Number 1, we're a little over time. Normally I would sign off at this point, and I love that. Kathy Roach, toxic positivity. That's awesome. I like that a lot. Okay. And thank you, Jeanette, and many others that I've seen coming in here that have shared that this has been really helpful for them today. Thank you. So number 1, I'm going to wrap this up and then I'm going to stick on Clubhouse for 15, 20 minutes and take questions, give people space to share and process, maybe do some coaching. We'll see. But let's talk about number 1. Okay. And this is number 1 for a reason. The number 1 toughest challenge of leadership that is not talked about enough is being wrong. Being wrong. Wyatt Wood Small once said, "You could be wrong, and you probably are." There is a grace and a kindness and a curiosity required to be productively wrong. Because I'm not saying you're wrong, meaning you are wrong as a human being, as a priceless human being. You are not wrong. But your ideas probably are. At some way, shape, or form. They've been shaped by what has worked up to this point, but not necessarily what's going to work tomorrow or what's going to work long term. So we don't anticipate being wrong, but we are curious about where the holes are in what we're saying, where the holes are in what we're doing. Okay, I would put it to you this way. The more elite you become, the better you become in this life. The more you grow, the more hypocritical you become. Did you know that? Think of anyone who's become better in sports, better in business, better in... Every one of them become more hypocritical, more contradictory, okay? And all of these things. It's inevitable when you become better because you can't please everybody. And life is messy. And when we become better and become more focused, we have less margin for error. And we're still human. So we expose more of our hypocriticalness. We expose more of our contradiction. But man, we've been taught to judge that. Oh, that person's a hypocrite. Awesome. So am I. So are you. Hi, Pot. I'm Kettle. Nice to meet you. That's part of being human. And great leaders never lose touch with that. Never lose touch with the fact that if I am becoming better, more elite in any way, financially, spiritually, whatever, I am exposing more of my humanity, which is hypocritical, counterintuitive, contradictory. That's the messiness of being human. It's part of the beauty of this life, that we never become immune to that. And in fact, as we become better, we expose more of it. So be ready to allow it to be there, to be curious about it, to appreciate it when it's pointed out to you. Because as Wyatt Wood Small said, you could be wrong and you probably are. But here's part of the counterintuitive, contradictory nature. You've got to take yourself too seriously so that you can learn to not take yourself so seriously. You can't stop doing one without the other. I've got to take myself too seriously so that I can make sure I don't take myself too seriously. I've got to learn how to drive in life so that I can learn how to use a brake. All of these things that seem to be working against each other that should be able to coexist. And that's hard to do. Especially with a brain that just wants to sort and wants to be all this or none of this or all of that or none of that. Yet our human nature is hypocritical and mixed and messy. And as soon as we need to be right, as soon as we start taking sides, as soon as we believe that our path to success is some linear, relevant progression rather than some winding, random yellow brick road with the weirdest stuff ever that happens that we may not ever understand why it happened for our good, but it happened. That's the journey we're on here. That's the choice we made to become a leader of ourselves or of others. And we could be wrong, and we probably are. You will want to be able to challenge you, but challenge you with the same grace, the same kindness that I'm asking you to challenge the people that you're facilitating leadership for, that you are challenging. Not to need to be right about you, because it's very easy to go, yeah, you're right, Paul, and now you need to be right about being wrong. Okay? Spin on that one for a second. Realizing that you could be wrong is not about needing to be right about being wrong, because that's still needing to be right. It's about being curious. It's about accepting your flaws. And I love the way I've heard it put before in terms of imperfect. If you put a space, it's I'm perfect. We are perfect in our imperfection. It's what makes the world go round. It's what makes this life so interesting, and so different, and so fun, and so frustrating, and all of the things. It's such a critical piece of leadership that's not being talked about enough. Too many people getting better and better and better and forgetting that they're still wrong. Too many people becoming more and more and more elite, standing at the top of the mountain, waiting for everyone to come rushing up. Because it's lonely at the top. Well, it's lonely at the top if you forget that you're probably wrong. If you believe that life is just this optimistic law of attraction of goodness coming in, of purity without the mess and the noise and the challenges. If you need to be right, creating an I told you so energy, if you're teaching, having great conversations and not actually making long-term impact, not allowing people to take their own Wizard of Oz journey, their own yellow brick road, and if you're taking unnecessary responsibility for their success so that all your gifts, all of your amazing talents are being diminished because of that emotional compromise, then maybe we need to rethink leadership for you. I sure hope not. Because if you're having any kind of aha or realization to this right now, it's not about today's aha. It's about building the habit of this kind of disruption. Disrupt your week is something you should do every morning, every day, every night. Be able to challenge yourself. To be able to believe that you figured it out so that you can realize you don't have it figured out. To take yourself too seriously so that you don't take yourself too seriously. To drive hard so that you can learn how to brake well. And all that sounds like a really weird, confusing tug of war, but it's the beauty of life. It's the essence of humanity. It prevents us from taking sides against each other. It prevents us from being convinced that there's only one right way to live their life. There's one right way for you to live yours, and it's in a disrupted state, challenging these pieces. We don't want to go into helping challenge and help facilitate and guide someone else's life by trying to get them to walk on our path. We've got to show up with love and empathy, empath, to stand on someone else's path so that we can see their yellow brick road, as random and weird and strange as it might be, and not be in too much of a hurry to shortcut their experiences. That does not mean we are passive leaders. That's not what I'm saying here. But we're going to be messy ones. But if we're loving ones, kind ones, and supportively demanding, one of my favorite descriptions of leadership ever, supportively demanding, then we're going to learn as much from the people we're leading as we're hoping to be able to teach them. We're going to experience as much as the people we're leading as we're challenging them to experience. And we're going to stay connected as humanity. Not as a whole. We're not going to stay connected to everyone in terms of them growing the way that you're growing or doing the things that you're doing. We're going to be able to sort more clearly, love more broadly, and be able to find more fulfillment in our success, more fulfillment in being unstable, more fulfillment in being messy, and realizing that whether you make $1,000 a month or $200,000 a month, that you kind of always feel this stuff if you're doing it right. Thanks everybody for being on today. This came from a lot of emotional angst. There's been a lot on my plate the last couple of weeks, for at least it's felt that way. And it's been a really interesting emotional roller coaster. A lot of it I invited onto my plate. I don't feel I'm a victim to what I'm experiencing right now, but it's put me in a really interesting state. It's spread me thin, and that's an opportunity where you can see through yourself pretty well. So I highly recommend that every once in a while, at an appropriate level, that you spread yourself too thin so you can see through yourself. And it is with the humility of seeing through myself, the understanding that I'm a messy leader, that I'm a contradiction, I'm a hypocrite. And I hope that's what can help me make an impact for you. Thanks, everybody. If you're on Clubhouse, please stick around. Take care.